Hi, friends. This is weird. It's like a virtual keynote. I'm so nervous. It is 1 o'clock in the morning, and I'm in Portland, Oregon. Not where I want to be, and I know that you also are not where you want to be. But I appreciate that you're spending time with us here at NDC. This is pretty special stuff. Hello to everyone on YouTube and on the chats and in the Slacks and all the places that you are. I appreciate you all spending time with me, and also for my studio audience, the speakers who have let me stare at them so that I don't have to talk to myself in a strange room while my wife is in the other room wondering what it is that I do for a living. Um, this is pretty exciting stuff. I really appreciate the technology and the effort, and I want to just say thank you so much for the team to put this together. It's really complicated to make something as professional and classy as this. I think it's pretty cool. So thank you to Dylan and Martin and all the friends that put this together. My name is Scott Hanselman. You may know me from the internet. If you followed me on Twitter, you're probably disappointed because you went there for technology content and you ended up with something else. But that's okay. If you're not familiar with me and the stuff that I do, I'll take a brief moment and just let you know what I like to talk about. You can go to hanselman.com and you can learn about me, or you can go and Google with Bing for Scott and find out what I'm all about. I've been blogging for a number of years now. In fact, if you go over to my blog and you click on date, it turns out I have been blogging since 2002. That's 18 years of blogging, which is just nuts. In fact, if you go and look at one of my years, I'll just pick 2019, for example, and I'll just start scrolling down a little bit. It turns out that I'm kind of a creature of habit. I basically blog every Tuesday and Thursday every year for 18 years. And then I've also got a podcast. I've got a podcast called Hansel Minutes. Hansel Minutes is called Hansel Minutes because I'm an extraordinarily bad estimator. Dylan knows this. If you ask me how long something will take, I'll say about 30 minutes. And then people will lean in knowingly and they'll say, is that Hansel Minutes or actual minutes? Because it's probably going to be about 3 hours. And this show is something I'm very proud of because I've done over 730 episodes for 14 years every Thursday. So why am I showing you this? Is it for the free advertising? Partially. But really, what it is I realized that I'm basically running a little business here, right? It's not a business that makes me any money. This is a business that basically sells ads to pay for hosting. But someone made the comment to me recently that it looks like it's quite a sophisticated setup. I've got my podcast, I've got all of my mini sites, the blog, 20 years of content, there's sites for books. It's kind of like Hanselman Incorporated if I had a business and any money. And someone actually emailed me recently and said, can you put me in touch with someone on your team? And I was like, I felt like I was going to put the one phone down and pick the other phone up and say, hello, this is Scott in sales. Let me put you through to Scott in marketing, right? And now that we're all trapped in our homes, I was realizing that I have more power than I thought, not as Scott internet person or Scott programmer with a lot of Twitter followers, but as Scott micro business owner. I've got this tiny little thing here, my blog, my sites, I've got about 16 different websites. If you go and search for getinvolvedintech.com, I've got a 2-hour documentary that's a free movie that you can watch that I did with Rob Connery that will talk to you about how to become a social developer. That's one site. A number of years ago, I wrote a website called Baby Smash. And you can actually, it's not for smashing babies, it's for actual babies to play and learn how to play with the computer, and it's super fun. And these are all websites that need SSL certificates and they need care and feeding. I realized that I've built a garden of things on the internet. And in fact, if you actually search for square foot gardening for programmers, it's very specific square foot gardening. I've even got blogs on how to do that. I've got this garden of websites. There's all of the sites that I maintain for myself and Hanselman Incorporated, and I say that in quotes. But there's also all those stupid little one-pagers, you know, those little one-page sites that you do just because I made a domain, because, you know, I was on Twitter and Ian said something funny and I registered the domain, and now it either is a website or it's just a failure. It's just a representation of my failure, this domain that I registered that I never did anything with. One of my joke domains is keysleft.com, where I can type in, you know, how old I am and how fast I type, and it'll actually calculate exactly how many keystrokes I have left before I die. I have 253 million keystrokes left before I die. And this is really important because that means I can either write 84 novels or I can write 1.5 million emails to my boss. So it gives you a sense of what you really want to do with your time. So we're all trapped at home. I've got all these websites. There was a time when these websites were running on a server that I could visit and a server that I could touch. And by touch, I mean like the cloud. Before the cloud, you would go and see your server. Some of the younger people may not remember that, but you could go, you say, where is my server? And you go to the big warehouse, the big Costco, Winco, Macro kind of place, and you say, where's my server? Oh, it's on row 9. You just walk down there and you go down to the row and you put your hand on the server. And you could push refresh on your laptop and you'd feel the server shudder because there was a spinning circle of rust that would start and grab your disk off and would say, yep, that's the server. And you could say, my computer at Hanselman.com is on that rack, on that server, in that refrigerator, in this row, in a building. But with the cloud, it's not like that anymore, is it? You can't visit your computer anymore. Well, Hanselman.com has actually been running on a server in Ontario for a very, very long time. And it was the last machine that's been running in this particular server. And that company was a hosting company that got bought by another hosting company, that got bought by another hosting company. And recently, I was on the Twitter, and I searched for from Hanselman server down, I think it was. And I was having an issue where my computer went down. And let me see if I can find that. Website down, blah, blah, blah. Maybe just search for down. It was Hanselman.com, and it was spinning. Did I maybe search for spinning rust? I think the spinning rust virtual machine that has run my blog for 18 years may have died 2 weeks before my migration to the cloud. This will be a live disaster recovery thread. So then I started talking about how I was going to move to the cloud. This is a 15-year-old website running .NET 2, right? .NET 2. And people would tease me every once in a while. I would get on Hacker News and I would say something. There was a time when I wrote an article once called URLs are UI. I was telling everyone, we need to care about our URIs. They should be crisp and pretty. URLs are UI. Isn't that the kind of Hacker Newsy thing that you would go straight to number 1? And what was the first comment on Hacker News? This from a man with ASPX in his extension. How dare you even you don't even get to talk. Like they dismissed the entire article because I had ASPX in the extension. I thought it was actually pretty good. It was because I saw this article in the paper with a specific URL for you to click. So the computer went down, and it was very sad. And again, this is a 15-year-old piece of hardware. So here's the deal. I tweeted about it, and then I called the folks that run that server, and I said, hey, I think the computer's down. Can you help me? And they said, who are you? And I said, I'm Scott Hanselman. I've been hosting my blog at your website for 15 years. And they're like, no. We got bought by some lovely French Quebecers. Who are you? I had been grandfathered in and grandfathered in and grandfathered in. I realized I hadn't even paid a bill in years. They'd forgotten about me. And I was actually in a computer under like Anna's desk somewhere. Oh, let's ask Anna. She was here back in the day. Let's see if you're under her desk. I was on a computer under the desk with a Post-it note on it that just said, don't delete this. It's Scott's. Literal, physical spinning rust. When I tweeted this, that my site was down. I tried to call tech support and they didn't even believe that I was at their company. I had to ping and traceroute to prove that I was hosted. And it turned out that one of the individuals that follows me on Twitter, this really actually happened. One of the people on Twitter who follows me happened to be in the NOC. The NOC is like the network station. They were actually doing maintenance on the machine. And he went over to the machine and he jiggled the wire on the back. And he DM'd me, I'm really sorry, I know this is not professional, I apologize. I'm actually in the room with your server right now. I'm going to jiggle the wire and get it back up. The server came back up, and now I'm in the process of moving this to the cloud. Okay? So here on this website that says URLs or UI, I think to myself, how would a company deal with that? I'm Scott Incorporated, but I'm only one person with one server in one place. But I want to be international. I want to have global load balancing in the cloud. I want to have CDNs and all this kind of stuff. And I want my URL to not have ASPX in the thing, right? Well, if you go to a URL like that right now, and then you put the word staging in front of it, okay? I hit enter. Now I'm ready to go to Hacker News and not, well, and they'll just be mean about something else. But the point is they won't be mean about my URL. So when you're running a little business like this, you got to think about all these things. A 302 or a 301 redirect, SEO, all the things that could go wrong, no, robots.txt. I want to do it in a way that's scalable and easy, but I also want to learn about the internet while I'm doing it. And this has been such an exciting journey to go and move a 15-year-old blog engine, and actually it's even older than that. It's called Das Blog. Anyone remember this? DAS Blog. It's German for the blog. Das Blog. You have to say it like a German. And it was originally built by Clemens Vastas, with German, lovely German man, you know. It's okay for me to talk like this because Hanselman is a German name with two N's at the end. We came to America, took away one of the N's. And now Das Blog is being converted by a lovely man named Mark Downey, Das Blog Core. So Das Blog, here he goes, there's Papa String. So he and I are building Das Blog in a way that will run on Linux, on Windows. We're doing it with .NET and with ASP.NET. And that's cool. And then Hanselman is going to need to go over to the cloud as well. So I'm slowly moving all these things to the cloud. But then things got really complicated. I've got my home page, which is brochureware. I've got my /blog, which is a website. And I've got /speaking and /pod. These are all mini sites. Some of them are pages, some of them are not. Maybe it should be, I mean, think about this. You're all writing this in your heads. Well, maybe it should be a static site generator. Maybe you should use Django. You know, well, you could do this and you could do that. Like, it doesn't really matter as long as the URLs are clean, right? I could switch the whole thing over to URLs. What did I say? URLs are UI.aspx. I could switch the whole thing over to static site generators or GitHub pages, but I don't want to lose my legacy. I don't want to lose this. Every link matters, right? Every link matters. So I started learning about ways to go and do this. So I thought I would spend a little time showing you how I've been doing this development and what makes me happy and how I feel like I'm just a whole company, but I'm just one person. Like I don't have a build person or security person or cloud person. It's just me. And I only have $67 in credit in Azure. That's another good thing. If you ever meet somebody from Microsoft who tells you all about the cloud and everything, and then you find out that they've never actually paid for anything before, they only do it in free credits, don't trust them. Always pay for your own stuff. So this is the Hanselman Dashboard. The first step in becoming an official real company and feeling like you're important, even though you're just one person in a room in Portland, Oregon, is you get a cool dashboard. And if you're really fancy, you buy a television set, a really cheap one, and you put it up on the wall, and you put the dashboard on the wall. And ideally, if there's a map of the Earth with dots that show all the different countries that you're in, it's even more impressive. I like to say that I have a global office space, you know, Starbucks, any country in the world. I put together this really cool dashboard to give me an idea of how much money I'm spending. And I'm really, really cheap. Like, I don't want to spend a lot of money. 20 bucks here, 30 bucks there, anything I can do to make this thing work. So while you might say, hey, Scott, go do a static site generator, in fact, what we end up doing is we just cache everything. 20 years of blog stored entirely in memory. Makes it really fast, and it's never been knocked over for traffic. And this is an example. Let's see if I scroll how fast our friends at WebEx can capture all the different stuff we've been doing. So it's a lot of content, a lot of great content going over many years. Okay, so what I did is I started with a thing that I just learned about called Front Door, Azure Front Door. It's kind of like Cloudflare. Super cool. So what this lets me do is design my front end. I've got my staging in my Hanselman.com, so I've got production and staging. All right. And then I've got back-end pools. Remember how I said the main site is different from the blog one? And then I put in rules. Here I'm learning about whether or not I want to force HTTPS or have blogs with slashes. Here are the two main routing rules here. And then when you have this one here that's blog, they take care of paying for the HTTPS. I can go and put in patterns, and it's basically lying to my app and doing the automatic rewriting. And what's called X-forwarded headers get automatically passed in. And the real blog is over here. Go to blog, and we'll say Hanselman blog. Look, oh, see this one here? Remember I told you I have a lot of websites? This one here is an extremely important website. That is my son's website. He made it in Visual Studio Code. And there's very important details about Reuben the hamster. And also I think we had a copyright issue with the YouTube video. Anyway, that's also very important. It's running in a container in the cloud. Okay, app service. Here we go. So sometimes you go, here we go. This is, here's Hanselman blog. You can see the traffic and the data out and moving around. When people go and learn about Azure, one of the first things that they do is they say, I want to make a website in Azure. And they go make a new website. And then it's like, 50 bucks? Oh, Microsoft with a dollar sign? You suck. And then they just delete it and they go off and get a dyno at, I don't know, Heroku or whatever, right? Well, it turns out that Azure and people at Microsoft are really bad at naming stuff. Because when you make a website in Azure, it's called an app service, not a website. That would make too much sense. And when you make a VM where you can put websites, that's called an app service plan, not a VM. It's actually a VM. I am notoriously cheap, as we have all said. Not only I am German, but I'm also half Scottish. And the Scots are well known for being incredibly cheap. You'll never catch Corona from a Scot because a Scot never gives anything away. And here, here I've got two app services. I've got one on Windows and one on Linux. Let us zoom in just to prove it. That's the proof that that's running on Linux. I'm just going to put as many arrows as I can around it. Okay. Now look at this. I've got 14 applications running in my main server farm, and I got 4 in the other. It's surprising to me when people start thinking about the cloud, they start thinking about it the way they think about virtual machines. Oh, this computer we've got, this virtual machine, it's got like 40% utilization, 60% utilization. We need to start thinking about capacity planning. We need to think about capacity planning. We should have more space to grow. But when the cloud, it doesn't work that way. You should work that machine into the ground. You should make it work hard. What do I have a lot of on this machine? I've got a ton of CPU. This thing's not even trying. It's not even breathing. You could beat on this and it would never hit 10% because I cache everything. Look at this. I'm barely hitting 40% memory. 16 different sites, full. It's just loaded up with memory. Because when you go in here and you look at these app service plans, which are really just virtual machines, what you got to do is ask yourself, what do I need and how much do I want to spend? I'm spending more money here. I'm spending double what I used to. I used to buy a 2 gig one. I don't care about the perf. I wanted the 4 gigs of RAM. That's the deal. I'm loading these things up. I've got like 16, 18 websites running on 2 machines, and I could probably shove them onto just 1 machine. And in fact, that is going to be my entire goal. My goal is to get all these 14 machines, all these 14 apps here on Windows over to Linux because it's 20 or 30% cheaper, right? I'm going to have more perf. I'm going to have a faster thing. Notice that I'm actually getting the premium SSDs for the same price Windows cost me on standard. So I'm slowly making my tiny companies maneuver over to Linux here. But remember back to DOS Blog? DOS Blog runs only on Windows, right? Because it's .NET 2. So we slowly started moving it. I started moving it, and I started moving my my podcast. So let's go out here to GitHub, and let's look at Hanselman first. Here's hanselman.com, and let's look at Hansel minutes. Here's the code, the real actual code. Okay, this, I'm using, by the way, I'm using Windows Terminal, which is just yummy. I love it. I cannot say enough nice things about it. You should get it, and you should have really cool prompts and stuff as well because it's the best. Okay, so here's Hansel minutes. Notice this here. I've got these Docker build, Docker run. What's going on there? Let's go take a look at that. Let's look at type Docker build. What is going on there? You know what that's called, everyone? This is a Linuxism that people just take for granted. That's a shebang. That hash bang there at the front, called a shebang, tells us that that PowerShell extension, Windows does everything based on extensions, but Linux would much rather be told explicitly what to do in the first line of the text file. That's ignored because it's a comment on Windows, but it's used on Linux, which means that I've actually got a PowerShell build file that works on both Linux or Windows, which is super interesting and useful, and it'll come up in a second. So then I can go and say Docker build. I'm on Windows right now, I'm on the D drive, and it says, hey, talking to Docker, right? That's cool. So it's going to go and it's going to build my little application. It's doing the build on Docker. And what I'm in fact doing, I'll open up another tab. So I've got my build over here, okay? And I'll come out here and I'm going to say WSL --list -v. And you can see I've actually got a number of Linuxes running in WSL2. One of them is in fact Docker itself. So I'm on Windows using the Docker desktop, talking to the Docker that's running within the context of WSL. But if I say Windows Docker images, I see my Docker images from Windows. But if I go out to, let's close some of these, and let's open up here. Look at all my lovely choices. Let's pick Ubuntu. And let's go and say, hey, Ubuntu. And let's say Docker images. And now I've got my Docker images. We are sharing the exact same Docker context. So whether I built it in Windows or built it whether I kick off the Docker build in Windows or Linux, it doesn't matter. So there you go. I just built that. Okay. So there I built my lovely multi-layered Docker thing, and I can go and run that. I now can do something else that I've really been enjoying lately. What if I did Docker test? I could actually go and run a build, and then this is a horrible thing, but this is the kind of horrible thing you do when you're a one-person shop. If is Windows, right? Because it all comes down to a horrible switch statement where you make a judgment call. If it's Windows, do this. Otherwise, it's that. This is where we get into the whole argument about slashes versus backslashes. This is a longer conversation that we won't be having this morning. But I want to point out, though, that Docker test.ps1 works everywhere. The other thing you might say is, why would you use PowerShell? Nobody uses PowerShell. Well, I'm not using PowerShell here. This is Bash, right? I'm over here in Ubuntu. I don't care about PowerShell from a shell perspective. I care about it from an automation perspective. That's where's PowerShell? Oh, it's off somewhere else. It's off in whatever. I didn't put in the path. I'm using PowerShell as a script runner. more than I am for a shell. Okay. Now let's go and run test instead, and let's do some tests and see if they run. I haven't tested this in a while. Maybe this is not even going to build. Let's find out. We'll do a test not on Docker, but rather we'll do one on the metal and see how much trouble we get into here. And let's see what's going on. Test run. It's thinking. I hear fans turning on. Things are freaking out. Pause for effect. Something's going to happen. What's going on? The disk is happening. I see the circle of patience. Is this the demo that's going to fail? This is not really a demo. It's my actual website, which would be even more tragic. Because if it was one thing, it's one thing to fail a demo. It's another thing to actually not be able to build your website at any moment. Oop, hang on. Hang on. What's that, WebEx? You're covering up the demo working on another screen? Scandalous. So what's happening is the test runner has spun up Selenium, wait, on another screen. What? It's been working all the time. It's actually loading up a local version of my podcast. Look, it says, look at that, look. What? Yes, I love it. Chrome is being controlled by automated test software. We are currently watching Selenium. Hanselman has test coverage. Good night, everybody. That was the show. Here, I'm actually using Coverlet, which is a lovely .NET-based test coverage application. And I went and I passed all of my tests. Who says Hanselman doesn't test? 23 tests, ship it straight to production. That's certainly enough tests to go directly into production, right? It's a decent amount of tests. It's pretty good. I'm pretty proud of myself. Some of those tests are Selenium tests, and some of those tests are functional tests, and some of them are integration tests. There's different layers in the testing onion, as our friends at NDC conferences well know. So how are we doing this, right? What's going on? Let us open this in Visual Studio Code, shall we? Visual Studio Code is loading. Okay. I've got two applications. One is tests. I made one called Selenium Tests. Again, behind every great function is a hack that you've buried in a static. This is called in Docker or build server. In the class, are we? Because we ask ourselves, are we in Docker or build server? And then we go and we look at a couple of things. First thing I look at is agent name, which tells me whether or not I'm running in the context of Azure DevOps. And did you know that .NET, say mean things that you might about the .NET team, they actually make an environment variable called .NET running in a container when they're running in a container. And that's how you know. Makes it really, really easy. So then I start up Selenium as part of the test, which I'm very proud of. Then I make a trait in XUnit that's called skip when live unit testing. So Visual Studio's background testing isn't popping Chrome windows up frantically. And then I love this line 100. It's always line 100. Look at that. Look at them. Are we in Docker or build server? Get out of there. So that means if we run that exact same test in Docker, which would not be able to then pop up a real version of Chrome. I would need a headless version of Chrome or Phantom.js or any number of different little things. Hello, look, Steven's boss has just shown up to watch the session. I appreciate that. I love having an audience. Docker test is going to go and run the exact same stuff. By the way, I love these. I don't know about you, but 3D accelerated, ray tracing, fine. Impress me with an ASCII progress bar. I'm that guy. I love a nice ASCII progress bar, don't you? You know what I'm talking about, Michael. You feel it. It's good. Look at that. You just like, if you put an ASCII progress bar in your application, it means that you care. It means that you care and that you want people to feel good about the experience at the command line. I want more. I'm a /verbose person. I want to talk. I want /v, not /q. We don't need any of that. what I'm going to
You
do
want to
here.
know? You want to know a funny thing about those little command line things you get there?
Is that really hard?
That is no. That is why you need a carriage return without a new line. Because if you print a carriage return, it takes it to the beginning of the line you got, and you can draw another one without
See,
printing it below it. That's why we need it. That's why
this is
Linux will always
why
fail.
this is why I like you, Dylan, because you add value. And here's the thing, my friend, that's a perfect segue as I do my tests to my YouTube channel with my new exciting playlist called, pause for effect, called Computer Stuff They Didn't Teach You in School. My first episode, what's a carriage and who's feeding it lines? I would encourage you to check out, if you would like to know what a carriage is, if you are under the age of 50 and you want to know who's a carriage, what's happening, I talk about typewriters. Because when you have a Git issue, when you've messed up an entire repository with white space and it's all your fault, it turns out it's because they needed a code to tell the carriage to return and feed the lines. It's just tragic, tragic stuff. All right, ooh, look, friends, what's happening here? Why did I skip 4 tests? Because I don't have a Chrome in the Docker container and I'm too lazy to hook up a headless Chrome to do the work inside of there with no UI. But I'm learning and I'm having a good time with it. What's cool about this is I've proven that I can run this in Docker, I can run it on Windows, I can run it with and without heads. Everywhere it runs, it works. Next step, let's make it automatic. So let's go to hanselman.visualstudio.com. And the best part of this whole thing and all the learning that I'm doing is remembering that I'm just one person. But when you have great unit tests and you can go git, clone, and build, you feel like at least 3 people. You know what I mean? So if we go to, here you go. This is my Azure DevOps. And I've got my blog, my website, my podcast, and my blood sugar system. You can learn about my artificial pancreas if you want to go and Google for Hanselman diabetes. You can learn all about that. If we go to Hansel Minutes, and we can go and see all the fun stuff that we're doing. Let's look at our pipelines. Look at that. I've not only got unit tests, but I've got a lovely CI/CD. And this is the best part. Look at this. PRs, I don't even know how to do the arrows anymore. PR automated. This is how you make one person feel like multiple people. Let's go to my secret GitHub, to my fantastic private, not for you people. This is totally, I'm not giving you the reason it's private is not because the code is interesting, it's because you're all going to steal the CSS. And I paid someone for that, and I don't want you to take it. Look at this. This is when you, imagine this, my friends. You are social distancing. You wake up in the morning on a private repository, and you have 11 pull requests. And you say to yourself, self, why do I have 11 pull requests? I was asleep. Who is doing these pull requests? Dependabot. Have you used Dependabot, Dylan? Have you experienced the joy and the wonder that is Dependabot?
Not voluntarily. It just popped up one day.
It's so cool. It's a person that's not a person that looks at your libraries and sees that they changed, updates them for you, makes the best PRs. And when I say best PRs, I'm talking about chef's kiss PRs. You know what I'm saying? Let's look at what a gorgeous PR. I love that I've been talking. I want to pause for a second and look at a question that just came up on YouTube because this is important. Individual just said the most impressive thing so far is the ability to make custom arrows on the screen. I just want to say that I have moved a 15-year-old blogging engine from .NET 2 into Linux, into the cloud, scaled it globally, put together a CI/CD. I've got Dependabot putting in PRs for me. I've got it running on WSL, on Windows, on Linux, and you're impressed with the arrows, and I appreciate you because those are actually coming from Zoomit, Jose Queiroz. These come from Zoomit, from our friends at Zoomit, from Mr. Rasinovich. So check out Zoomit. That is how I'm drawing on the screen. But I'm glad that you are unimpressed with the global elastic scale of the cloud and rather impressed with my arrows. Okay, check this out. Look at this. Dependabot. Okay, Dependabot made a comment 2 days ago. You should bump this from this version. This is the best. Look at this here. You open it up. They actually go and dig out the release notes, link to them, and copy paste them in. Then they actually figure out the commits on the previous version to your version inclusive, and then list out the commits so you can tell what they changed and whether or not you should upgrade. So freaking cool. Then you can talk to it. Okay, look at this. See what it says? Oops. Dependabot, where did it go? Commands. Check this out. You, one individual who has no employees, can then go, hey, Dependabot, go ahead and rebase that. Or, oh, you know, close this PR, reopen this PR, or ignore this. Talk to me when it's a major version. The power that we as individual humans have now, even in these difficult times when we are stuck in our homes, and my little tiny mini business here, the power of automation is just so unreal. I just love that someone, a bot, is doing this for me. I love that I can check in code and it will build in the cloud and deploy to the cloud into staging. The idea that I even have a staging site is so far from the way that I used to edit stuff directly in FTP in production and then just hit refresh and hope that the site didn't fall over. The power of automation is such a joy for us right now that I want to kind of like remind you that it's a thing, remind you that whether it be things like containers or the cloud or open source, what a joy, what a wonderful joy. Let me also show you one other fun thing that's not directly related to Hanselman.com, but it's so awesome that it has to be talked about. Let's go out here. So I'm on WSL. We talked about this, the Windows subsystem for Linux. You can prove it by running htop if it makes you happy. You can see that there's in fact processes over here that are talking to Docker desktop. And if I go in here and let's see, do I have anything in this folder? No, I don't. Do I have .NET in this thing? .NET version? I do have a version of .NET. Let's go and make a Dylan is nice. And we'll say Dylan is nice. Okay, it's an empty folder. New web. Okay, so I'm gonna go file new project, command line edition. That's what that is. And now I've got stuff. Now where am I? I am in Linux. Okay, I'm gonna say code dot. To be clear, this is Linux. I will then, oops, what am I doing? Click the wrong, click the wrong button. Okay, then I will go code dot, and I will run Visual Studio Code from Linux. This is stub. Now watch. Visual Studio Code knows it was launched from Ubuntu, but it's in Windows. If I go File, Open, what file system is that? What file system is that? That's the Linux file system. Here, if I say show local, this is the Windows file system. What Visual Studio Code has done is it has run a server. If we run back over here and we run htop, let's see where our server is. See if I can get it to do something. Maybe I can get this to build. And in the output of this, it was running, there it is, a remote server. It runs it splits Visual Studio in half. Has Visual Studio Windows, Visual Studio Server, and why is that interesting? Let's close out of here. Let's go back to Windows. What if we go over to something like, do I have Go? Okay, check this out. This is Windows. I do not have Go on this computer. I'm on Windows. I do not have Go. I'm not a Go programmer. Code dot. Opens up Visual Studio Code. It says this is a developer container. Why don't you do this in a container? Sure, let's do that. Let's move that guy. Reopen in container. Look at the lower left corner. It says opening remote, starting dev container. We are now in a container. And if I go here and I say IO dot, I have full go because I'm running in the context of the container. That makes sense? So now I can hand this folder to Ian, right, or to Jessica and say, here, and they just open it. And all the tool sets that they need are there. Because if you look at the dev container, the JSON has two things. First, the Docker file with the toolkit that it needs. And this is the cool part. What's this? These are extensions, Visual Studio Code extensions. But where are they installed? I don't want to clutter my machine. My machine's lovely. I don't want to mess it up. So what we do is we separate the local extensions. Go is only installed in the container. Isn't that cool? So that auto installs the extensions you want in the context of the container and remotes them. So any extension in Visual Studio can live both locally or not. Those servers are actually running in the context of this container right here. See? Those are the node processes that are talking to Visual Studio Code, and then there's some Go stuff. Really great stuff. So then extrapolate to what kind of damage you could do if you went to something like this. Actually, let me not log in with work. I'll show you what I'm paying for, because I don't want to be the guy that does demonstrations and doesn't pay for it. Where is my other browser? There we go. Let's pull this one over here. online.visualstudio.com. Sign in. And while I'm doing that, I do want to call something out, though. This is interesting. A gentleman said that's a simple lift and shift. It's actually not. There's more there than a lift and shift. I'll talk about that in a second. But I want to point out here, I've actually put a development environment. Let's say that I don't have a big machine, a big beefy computer. I can instantiate one in the cloud, but I'm not going to remote desktop into it. That would be coarse. That would be like, oh yeah, I made a virtual machine and you remoted into it, blah, right? Instead, what if I could actually open that, turn this on, boot that up, and then do the exact remoting trick that I just showed you, and let all the compilation happen in the cloud. So you could be on a Chromebook or a $300 Walmart laptop and make a machine that's per second building in the cloud, connect to it. Oh, I don't have. Do I have Visual Studio Code or have installed? Which one do I have? There's Insiders and there's Visual Studio Code. Let's try that again. So when you connect to it, you have like your plan. You can figure out like what plans you want. So over here, I can say, I want to go and make a new plan that's going to be this big. It'll be a Linux machine that's super powerful, yada, yada, yada. We'll spin this up in a second here.
And a plan there is a VM, right?
And this is the thing, right? I mean, it's that they're just so bad at naming. It's just unreal. I don't know why that's not letting me connect. I may have changed what I want. Let's see if we can go from over here. So I want to go back over here and I want to say connect. Is it remote? There's all these remote things that you can do. There it is. Remote containers, close remote connection. This is all just an extension of Visual Studio Code, which is lovely. Remote containers, Visual Studio Online. I think I didn't even install a Visual Studio Online, VS Online extension. Here it goes, Visual Studio Online, blah, blah, blah. Did I sign in? I think so. I wonder if I'm blocking it at the pie hole. I have a pie hole, which is a
We got a
DNS.
comment come through on YouTube saying click on link, not on connect. So you might want to try that.
Click on the link?
Click on link, not on connect, apparently.
Well, I clicked on the link. Try both.
Try both.
And this one will go into the environment this way, which is Visual Studio Code in the browser. Thank you for that, Dolly. Appreciate your help. Let's go and do that while I'm doing that. This is, again, all in preview, so this thing changes every couple of days because they're releasing new versions all the time. It's that right there where this should actually be VS Code : // It's actually a protocol handler. So that right there is one of my extensions that's mad at me. Or it's an Edgium thing.
This is the whole URL's a user interface, and if the protocol in the URL doesn't work, then hey, the user interface just failed,
Yeah,
right?
I'll figure out why that's not working. But when you when I do the click on the link, there I am in here. What I would have done, of course, is jumped over into Visual Studio Code like we just saw, and it would have connected remotely. And in this case here, this is in fact DOS Blog. Now let me get back to the point there where Christian was saying it's a simple lift and shift. Yes, it would be incredibly naive to simply pick up a virtual machine that was sitting on a thing and then stick it into the cloud. That would be lame. Why would I do that? So let's talk about legacy code very briefly, because I'm running out of time. Legacy code is a funny thing, my friends. When you've got something that's super old, but it totally works, you tend to not want to break it. And my blog is one of those things. So where is the database for the Hanselman blogging system for the last 20 years, you may ask? Well, it's in here. Pause for effect. I love that some of you are muted and I can see you laughing, which is lovely. Yeah, so it's basically 5,000 XML files in a folder, right? Because that's how you roll when it's 2001 and XML is the new hotness. You laugh now, but I know you have JSON files in a folder and you think that your curly braces are so much better than my angle brackets, so boo-hoo. Okay, now, lift and shift, to the gentleman's point on the chat, would actually be, yeah, pick up a virtual machine and put it into the cloud. Yay, good job, kudos to you. But how could I move my stuff into the cloud, potentially in a more sophisticated manner, setting me up for future success? Well, putting it in a virtual machine would be kind of fine. Putting it in a Docker container would make no sense. Why? Because the data needs to be outside the Docker container. I want to do a mapping, right? Well, what we did is we moved our application from running on Windows on IIS to running in Linux on Kestrel, which means it can then run in a Docker container. I deploy it into, I commit it into GitHub. It goes over and gets built into Visual Studio, Azure DevOps rather. And then we go to the blog here. It's actually Hanselman blog. Look at this. Configuration, path mappings. We lie to our old application, and we said this folder here points to an infinite Azure Files share. What that means is I can go into the Azure Storage Explorer and map the Azure storage, this infinite disk in the cloud, and copy all of those files over there, which is super interesting, right? That means that all the data is completely externalized from the application, but I didn't have to tell the app that. I didn't have to teach the app that. I literally lied. I want to point out also to our friend who may have shown up a little bit late there, Mala Ingasar Digital, unless you have Azure Free Pass from being an Azure employee, a Microsoft employee. This is not an Azure Free Pass. This is my actual personal Azure, and I pay for it with my own money, and it comes out of my credit card, and I'm happy to show you the bill. I don't get free Azure money, but I appreciate you bringing that up, because I've actually done a series of blog posts. If you go and search for Hanselman penny pinching in the cloud, did a series of blog posts about how cheap I am and how I can save money in the cloud. So definitely not doing that for free. Cool. So then look at this blog content. This is Azure Storage Explorer. See where it says 4,000, 5,000 cached items? All the XML lives there. That means it's redundant. Remember at the very beginning of the conversation, I talked about how you used to be able to visit your disks. I can't anymore. My blog doesn't know that it's moved from .NET on Windows and IIS to .NET Core, open source, in a Docker container, in a Linux machine, in the cloud somewhere that moves around. And the XML files that it calls file.open on, they don't even exist anywhere near it. They're on an Azure share somewhere. So through a series of lies, we call them abstractions in the software world, as we lie to this system, we actually go from being a simple lift and shift to being a really creative way to move a legacy application into the cloud. The next really interesting bit, as we get towards the end of the conversation, is the images. Where do all the images go? Well, not only are there 5,000 plus XML files, there's actually thousands more images inside of that blog content folder. And those images right now have only a couple of, they're hard-coded basically. Like it's hanselman.com/blog/images, yada, yada, yada. And there's gigabytes and gigabytes of these images. How do I put them on a CDN? This is where it all goes to heck. This is where, if you've been offended already, you will be, you're like, this guy can't code any at all. This guy sucks. Let me show you how bad I can suck. And you may let he and she who has never worked in a legacy system cast the first stone. Let me just tell you that. Until you've worked on a machine that is older than you, let me just say, be empathetic, be gentle, be kind. If I show you the, I want to say it is almost done. It's gonna be crazy. Code, opening code, test. It is in a file called Jinyang blog item. All right, Dylan, drink this in. Tell me what's happening on line 31 and why it's both genius and horrible.
That's string replacement.
Yes, it's always, because it always is string replacement. There's two ways to solve this problem. Go into the database, write a regex, and steal every single reference to this URL in 5,000 files and replace it to a new one. That's
and
one option.
When you say database there, you're talking about a huge folder full of XML that's 15 years old, right?
Database in air quotes.
Database.
Right. Your other option would also mean I could go and put in a rewriting module, so I could capture every single moment where the browser asked for that URL, but then it would cost a 301 redirect. So I need to catch it on the way out, not the way in. Like, it would be interesting to grab it on the way in, but what I want is I want to catch it on the way out. So again, I drop every single thing into Azure storage, okay? And then I make a CDN, the Hansel CDN. And what Hansel CDN does is amazing, pat myself on the back, because look, I just make these subdomains and I go and say, where's the origin? Where's the origin for these things? It's just this CDN. So instantly what happens is the entire blog's, every image on the blog gets replaced and sent off to the CDN, and the whole site gets faster because the blog images are now stored in Portugal and not in Oregon. Everybody wins. And then one day, and then here's the best part, you put in to do, really need to fix this, but not me, someone else, someone who's not me. But I will get around to eventually going and replacing that in the database. Okay? And I think that's all my time, but I wanted to just talk about how lovely it is to be a one-person shop and get all of this stuff working. I remember 20 years ago getting cruisecontrol.net just started, and we were just doing extreme programming and end-unit testing on .NET. And I just love that everyone has every language, .NET, Ruby, Python, everyone's got a great unit testing framework. Everyone can enjoy Git. Everyone can enjoy unit testing. And I appreciate Christian and our friends who are playing sarcasm with me here on the chat. I appreciate you giving me talking points, and I appreciate you also letting me tease you gently, knowing that it is all with a sense of love and in community.
So
Thank you
Scott,
so much, Dylan.
we have two quick questions, and
Yes,
both
sir.
of them are about your Windows terminal setup.
Oh my goodness.
So one of them is actually it's a question from me. So on the little orange bit of your prompt there,
Yes, sir.
what do the glyphs mean? The +9 squiggly 2 -1 bang.
So this means that there are 9 things that have been added to Git staging, 2 modified and 1 removed in my dirty Git repository here.
Oh, that's cool. So that's just like a sort of ambient. This is how much changes you've got and how much stuff is outstanding and hasn't been committed
let's
yet.
go here. What's going on here though? What's the down 4 then? There's 4 changes above me.
Ah, okay.
So I'll pull them down.
Neat.
And now there's the 4 changes. See, down 4, now there's 4 changes. Now here I have 1 locally, git status. There it is.
Nice.
Cool.
The other question, Danny DeClerc asked this one through our Slack channel, was some talks you did last year. You talked about having like diabetes and blood sugar readouts coming up in your terminal when you're working. Is that still a thing you're doing?
Yeah. So if you go to Hanselman Diabetes Git, we have on some of my other prompts, I have my blood sugar happening in my prompt in real time. And that's updated with a local service that calls a REST endpoint, updates a local text file, and then the prompt picks up that text file. But I know my blood sugar is on my watch now. It's on my wall. I don't need to put it in there. And I can also view it, I can actually go and view it like on a website and look at it too. So I'm good either way. Oh, another thing I wanted to point out also is that these websites that I play with, I actually have the exact git commit and build and link to them at the bottom of the website, so I can go and see that was the commit and that was the build. So anytime I'm like, well, what is production running? It's running that pull request, and it built from that pipeline. And all of that's on my blog.
Fantastic. So the one thing we've not worked out how to virtualize yet is rounds of applause. But I'm sure that everybody around the world, the 300 and how many we got? 381 people watching this on YouTube. So thank you all of you for tuning in. We've got a little kind of tame audience of people in the call here because it's much easier than talking to a webcam by yourself at, what is it, 2 o'clock in the morning where you are, Scott?
It is now 2:02 a.m., my friends.
So
and I'm only on my 9th Diet Coke of the day.
On behalf of all of the attendees, the speakers, partners, everyone who's put this together, thank you so much for joining us and doing that. We will all be hanging out online. The folks who are attending, if you've got a ticket to NDC Porto, see us in the Slack workspace. There's going to be chat and stuff happening on there. To all the folks who are watching on YouTube, you should have bought a ticket. But hey, we got this thing coming up in Oslo next month, so there's still time to get in for that. Thank you very much, Scott. We're going to take a short break. I think I'm doing a talk in 20 minutes, so I need to go and find a one of those webcam things. I wonder do you think Amazon can ship one of those to me in 15 minutes? It can't be that hard, right?
No.
Thank you, everybody, for joining that. Thank you, Scott. Have a great day and a great conference, everybody. We will see all of you online. Take it easy.